Hey, it's Mark, and I'm back with another great episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week epitomizes what overcoming adversity and finding your way. This guy is Brett Archibald. This is a guy that's a South African that was on a surf trip with his buddy, and he ended up falling overboard in the Indian Ocean and then surviving 28 hours, shark attacks, seagull attacks, stingray attacks, all the mental games you have to play. Just an amazing tale. So just an incredible journey with Brett. He is the author of Alone, Lost Overboard in the Indian Ocean. So we go through the entire journey, the story, what came out of it at the end, what is most important to him, which is really amazing. So super grateful for him coming on, beamed all the way down to Cape Town in South Africa from my home here in Sun Valley. Just a really super fun conversation about his journey and what that path has been. Always, if you want to know what's going on with me, you can find that out at www.markpattisonnfl.com. I continue to set my sights on the mountains in front of me, which right now are Vinson and Mount Everest. I head down to Vinson in Antarctica January 6th of 2019. I'm getting fired up. I'm getting all the evacuation insurance and my gear checked and all that stuff, and I'm training harder than ever to make sure that I make that summit and come back successfully and alive and well and pumped up as I ramp up for hopefully will be my seventh mountain on Mount Everest. I'm sure everybody's heard about that one. As always, remember to rate and review. Go into iTunes, really helps us out. And if you know anybody, please send them my way. And again, you can contact me via my website at markpattisonnfl.com. And as always, we are sponsored by Violets Are Blue Skincare. It's awesome. I use it, all organic and by a former podcast guest, Cynthia Besteman. She's awesome. She is the best. All right. So on that note, let's go talk to Brett. Here we go. Hey, it's Mark, and I'm back with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit. And this week, we've got an amazing episode with a person. His name is Brett Archibald, who actually fell overboard and had to survive 28 hours in the Indian Ocean. Just an incredible tale. So talk about somebody overcoming adversity and finding their way. This certainly is the case. So today I am broadcasting from my new hometown here in Sun Valley, Idaho, all the way down to South Africa in Cape Town. So Brett, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah. Sorry about the little slip we just had a few minutes ago, but the police have gone by, and now I think we're both in a very safe zone.
Yeah, they could go by again. It's Africa, man.
Yeah. So over the 4th of July, I was at the home of Pat Patnam and his wife Vicky here in Sun Valley, Idaho, and so we went down there and had a great time the whole day. And so through the course of that social engagement, we were talking about my pods, and so I asked kind of the people that were down there, like, hey, if you ever know anybody that's overcome anything crazy, that's who I like to have on my show. Love the recommendation, the referrals, and send them my way. So about 3 days later, I got this email from Pat, and he had introduced you to you and I together. And I started researching your story, and I was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, I have talked to people with no arms, no legs, they're blind, they have no hearing, but I have not had a survival story quite like this yet. And so I'm very intrigued to get into how this whole thing went down.
Sure. You know, Mark, it's 5 years ago, and I can tell you some days it feels like it was just 5 days ago. Other times I look at the ocean in Cape Town every day, and I honestly, my wife and I look out at that sea every day, and I just shake my head in disbelief, because I was given by the top sports science doctor in South Africa. One of the DJs on the early morning show heard about the story and contacted this professor and said, how long has this South African guy got? And he said, well, unless he's an Olympic athlete, he's probably got about 8 hours. And then when I survived 28 and a half hours, don't forget that last half hour, I'll share with you because it was probably the worst part of the whole thing. He contacted me and he said, I got to talk to you, man, because this is just crazy. And it is, to this day, I'm just blessed to be alive.
Yeah, of course. So how do you, how does somebody, and we're going to get into the details of how this whole thing went down here in a minute, but how does somebody tread water for 28 hours? And in your case, I think you're actually trying to swim as well. And I don't know how you stay buoyant in that way without your body just physically giving out, and then you just, you have no more.
Yeah, well, it did. To be fair and to be honest, my body gave out 8 times, but the most crazy and weird things happened. Every time I just had nothing more left in me, something radical happened. I mean, I had crazy hallucinations. I was bumped by a shark. I was stung by jellyfish. I had seagulls dive bombing me and trying to pick my eyes out. So all of those things that's why this story is just so intense, because I know, even looking back now, that I'm a modern day miracle. I mean, no one can swim. No one has swum for that long. And whilst, to be fair, I was not trying to swim to get anywhere, it was such a bad storm. I just did a breaststroke, pull my arms, kick my legs so I could see a wave coming, take a breath, get under it. Because for the first hour, I think I just got pounded and pounded and pounded. And I just was swallowing salt water, coughing, spluttering. And I was just ready to go then. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I just didn't know how I was going to die or how long it would take. Was I going to be eaten by a shark? How long would it take? Would I just drown and sink to the bottom? Those were all the questions going through my head the whole time.
So let's reset this thing. So as the story goes, as what I read, you decided to go on a surf trip with your buddies. And so... Yeah. Right, so you are in the process of trying to get to this small island, and to get there, you had to fly from here to there and then hop on this boat, and now you guys have some kind of a calzone, a pizza type folded over sandwich, right? And it was cut open, and now you and the others are like looking at this thing. You kind of smelled it, you took a bite or two, and that was it. Yeah,
look. So there were 9 of us, 9 school buddies. We've known each other since we were 5 years old. A couple of us had been before, so it's just kind of, I just think friendships are so special, and we'd always try to. We all lived in different parts of the world, and time races by. So every 2 years we try to put one of these trips together, and we got kind of a core group of guys that always go. This time was such a weird. The whole thing started so badly. I mean, I pulled out of the trip. I wasn't going to go because my business was in so much trouble. Then my mate said, no, you got to come. And my wife even said, just go. There's nothing you can do in the meantime. Go and have a 2-week break, come back and we'll sort things out. One of the blokes who lives in Dubai, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, melanoma that had to be removed. So he was off the trip. So it was a very morose bunch of blokes that arrived in this town of Padang off the west coast of Sumatra. We had a 10 to 12 hour sail across the Mentawai Strait. We should have got on the boat. We all arrived at 11 a.m. We should have got on the boat straight away. Skipper took the boat up the river, so we were tide dependent and we could only sail that evening. So we were a really grumpy group of guys. We got on this thing. The skipper said to us, listen, guys, if I use the chef to help me with the moorings, etc., will be the quickest boat to go. Here come the cops again. Yep. and that's what we did. So they got us takeouts. And I always say now in jest, in Indonesia, get nasi goreng or noodles. In Italy, get pizza and pasta. Don't get pizza in Indonesia. We got these calzones. We dived into them. So we got 3 massive big pizzas, and 3 guys to a pizza. The one pizza was fine. The other 2 were just horrific. But interestingly, most of the guys just ate them and washed them down with a beer because we were so hungry after 54 hours of traveling. And then we set sail. The storm picked up. Most of the guys went down to bed. We went kind of crashed at about 11 p.m. that night. I woke up at 1:30 in the morning with our boat just smashing into the waves. Wow. I became a skipper at a young age. I've never been seasick in my life, so I didn't know what it felt like. I needed to go to the bathroom. I climbed up this little ladder to see this giant 6'5", 300-pound friend of mine who'd eaten most of the pizza, just vomiting like you can't believe. And I said, look, I need to go to the bathroom. The same thing happened to me. I started being ill. I thought I was okay. I went out to get some fresh air and found him lying there, just vomiting blood. It was just too terrible. I said, he was lying in the wash of the boat, diesel fumes. I said, we need to get to the top deck. Got him up to the top deck. I gave him a Coke because I knew we were both dehydrated. I said, come on, buddy, let's just drink these Cokes. And he just said, please find out how long we've got to go.
How big was how big was his boat?
It was a big boat, a 65-foot boat. 5 cabins shared by 2 blokes in a cabin. And then the crew all slept on the top deck. But it was an old tub, you know. It's a good boat, but it was an old tub. And so we were right on the top deck. Now I go to the skipper's cabin. I look down and I look at the GPS and I see we're not even. It's a 127-mile crossing, and we're about 50 miles into the crossing. And I look down. It's now 2:15 a.m. in the morning. I say, buddy, we were meant to be there by 4:30. He told us we'd be in the water surfing by 5:30 in the morning. And I said, what's going on? He said, he did very broken English. He said, Mr. Brett, storm bad. So I said, why didn't you turn around? You know, why did you head into the storm? Why don't we go back to port, spend the night in port and go out the next day? I didn't know, but our boat was in bad nick. It was taking water on.
Yeah.
He didn't want to turn into the storm, so he just kept plying straight into the storm. So I walk back out, tell my buddy this, and he just starts being sick. Now, I've just drunk a Coke. I see him being sick. I get going. I go to the railing, and it was so bizarre, Mark. I'm holding on the railing. I look to my right. 10 inches away from my right hand is a buoy, and my brain says, just tie that buoy to your arm. And in that moment, I start vomiting, and I'll never forget. I vomit once, twice, and the third time, I just remember this pain shooting up my spine, hitting the back of my brain, and I thought, if I vomit like that again, I'm going to black out.
Yep.
And the next thing, I am in a washing machine. I'm dreaming, obviously. I'm a kid again. I'm tumbling around. What they figured after I'd fallen off the side of the boat, it was a good 6 meters, hit the water, got sucked under into all the white water behind the propellers, and I was bouncing around, and then as my head popped the surface, I saw the lights on my boat, my mate lying there, and them just heading into the storm.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle of the ocean, 50 miles out to sea.
So at that point, were you just freaking out? I mean, I can't imagine.
Freaking, man.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you're watching this thing float away.
I saw my mates. I could see him lying there. There was one of the Indonesian crew members was on night duty. When I was helping my mate up the ladder to get him to the top deck, this guy was sleeping, and I said, "Hey, buddy, wake up! You're on night duty." And as my head popped the surface, I saw him sitting there in his plastic chair, like the fishing chair, fast asleep. And I screamed, mate. I screamed. I thought my lungs were going to come out of my lungs. I just screamed, but no one heard me. It was the middle of the storm. They just sailed away.
Well, there's always a lot of noise, between the engine, between the waves, and you're describing a big storm too. So that's not helping anything, right? And
No.
And so, I'm sure you're screaming your head off, and between being passed out and sick and late at night and everything else, you just had it was the perfect storm, metaphorically speaking, in terms of just having all these things, 100%. Set up that they're going to go wrong.
Everything. And in that split second, it was the most amazing thing. I would have bet my bottom dollar that I would never fall off a boat. But I find myself in the ocean. I'm looking at this, and actually, I thought there was a hyena. It's a wild animal from Africa.
Yep.
It makes a really bad noise in the bush at night. I thought there was a hyena in the water because I heard this rah, rah, and I realized it was actually coming out of my own throat, and it was this hysterical laughter. And I knew this was where I died. I just didn't know how or when.
Yeah. Crazy.
It was horrific, man.
So I'll freeze that story for just a second, just to relate on something I went through when I was 18 years old. I was sent, so I ended up getting a scholarship at the University of Washington and to play on the football team, right? And so as a senior going into my freshman, part of the promises is like, hey, I'd like to have a job. And so they said, well, we can set you up with this construction company in downtown Seattle, which was my hometown. And so I did that, and I made, in those days I was making a ton of money for a, 18-year-old kid transitioning from high school now into college. So now that happens, my year goes by, I come back to the same guy who helps place different athletes in different job positions throughout the summer. I go, hey, I'd love to have that job again. And he goes, no, I don't think so. So now I go from the big hot recruit to some, low life in the program, and I'm a freshman, I'm struggling. And so they go, this year you're going to Alaska. So I go up there, and I end up on this 185-foot processing ship way down in the Aleutian chain. So if you look at Alaska, there's a little tail that screams all the way down. And I was there for a couple of days, and then we headed north and through the Bering Sea up into this small town called Dillingham, and it was about a 500-mile journey. And during that journey, we got in this humongous storm. So again, I was on a 185-foot processing boat, and we had waves coming over our bow. And they said, in our case, if you fall over, you've got 10 minutes. That's it. And because the water is so frigid. In your case, now you're in the Indian Ocean. So I'm the last remembrance I have of the Indian Ocean was the Top Gun film, where they have this combat. Tom Cruise is up there, and they're over the Indian, right? All that goes down. Yeah. And I believe it's a warm water. So you're not dealing with, the frigid temperatures that I was dealing with in Alaska. You're dealing with warm water. So at least if you start going through all these things in your head of like, I can't believe you're screaming like a hyena, you at least are the one thing favorable to you is that you're in warm water and that you don't have 10 minutes before you freeze and you die.
Yeah, there were two major things in my favor. One was the water was warm, but interestingly, through the second night, the water temperature drops 4 to 5 degrees, and as a result, your body cools down so much. So I did get hypothermia, my teeth were chattering, and I was biting my tongue off. But that was much later, that the second night. But so the water was warm. I had a pair of board shorts on and a T-shirt. But we also had a huge amount of rain, and the sun never came out that day. It was cloudy the entire day, so that kept the sun. Because it really gets warm. I mean, it gets to like 40 degrees centigrade in the midday, because it's right on the equator. So instead of getting cold, you're actually dealing with boiling. You're like a lobster in a pot, man. Yep.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So on one hand, you're in warmer waters, but the other hand, you're in the water for such a long time that your body temperature is dropping. And the one fortunate thing, as you said, is that the sun didn't pop out, and that you had cloud cover most of the day. So let me ask you about these Seagulls dive bombing. I mean, I've never heard of Seagulls. You see these throughout the Pacific Northwest, and they're just nice and friendly and everything else that zip around. But I don't see them attacking people, going after people. Swimming, having a good time in the water.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't believe it. In fact, I just watched that movie with my kids, Finding Nemo, and the seagulls helped Nemo get back home. So I've got this whole vision of seagulls being such cool things. But I found out afterwards, going to see some guys who specialize in these kind of birds, that they're actually scavengers, So when they're swimming out there and they see a dead fish floating along, they'll just dive down and grab it. And interestingly, the sea rescue guys were sharing with me afterwards that a number of bodies that they find that don't get rescued, the eyes, the lips, the ears, the nose, all the soft skin on your face, all gets eaten away because they're scavengers. They land on the body and they just pick away until the skin gets tough again, and off they go. I also never thought. But interestingly, I know I had fallen asleep, even though it was brief seconds. I was swimming along, my head kept dipping in the water. I was going, I can't fall asleep, and I must have fallen asleep, because this thing hit me on the back of the head so hard, and when I lifted my head up, another one hit me on the forehead, I still have a lovely scar on the bridge of my nose from it. And then I just heard this like squawking and these feathers and this flurry of activity around my head. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And suddenly I start screaming like, get away, get away. And I got a bit hysterical because I'm now screaming at two big birds. And I mean, they're bigger. They're not little birds. They're not like you get. I don't know if they're different types of birds, but I mean they stand knee high.
Yeah.
And they damn heavy. I mean these guys were just. I actually thought I could catch one and eat it and would save my life. At one stage, but that's how radical. I mean how stupid my thought process were. I thought I could catch one and. I was so thirsty, I would have eaten them and drunk his blood.
So when they were coming in, are they coming in hot, or do they kind of gingerly come in and
No, they're coming in hot. They were swooping around like, I mean, I remember thinking this is almost like like an attack plane. You know, he's going up, he's lining himself up, and they came round in these circles and dive bombed me, coming at me, and their claws, and I'm screaming and waving my hands. And at these and shouting at them, and I still can hear the as they came over me. You know, their wingspan is probably a good 10 feet, 8 feet, just coming over my head.
Yeah.
But they only did it twice, and then they realized I wasn't just lying there. I was slapping the water and screaming and shouting. They started like going wah wah, and then they flew away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come back, guys, come back.
So now you've just dealt with that, and then the next thing that comes along is you get a bump from a shark. Do you know what kind of shark it was?
It was a black-tip reef shark. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've done lots of diving in that part of the world. And I tell you what, I always laugh because when I saw this thing bumped me, and at first I just thought it was barracuda, you know, a shoal of fish. But I'm also petrified of them because I call them the Doberman of the sea. And interestingly, the back of my knees was bleeding quite badly from just doing breaststroke, and the cotton hem of my cargo board shorts was rubbing against my knees all the time. So I remember the pain, and that was a thing that I also believe kept me going because every time I kicked, it was irritating, you know, so I was aware of it the whole time. But I kept thinking, God, if that starts bleeding badly, it's going to attract sharks. Then I get this bump, and I think, oh, God, that's a fish. And then this thing actually nudged me and moved me. So I think I have to go under the water and see this with my own eyes. And I'll never forget finning around, and I saw this little guy coming at me, but to me, he was the size of the red bus that goes around New York, you know. It's like, oh, my God. And it was so weird because the first thought then was a negative thought. It was so interesting. In 8 really weird circumstances, my first thought was a negative one. I thought, okay, in a way negative in the sense that I was just so relieved I now knew how I died. I remember thinking, buddy, I lifted my head up and said, just bite me in the neck. Bite my head off in one go, and then it would be painful. You know, I didn't feel like wrestling a shark. And I'm looking, and in that split second of the negative thought, I see his fin. And I know it's a black-tip reef shark. I know a little bit about their habitat, and then they're not big open water swimmers. They like the rocky reef areas. You know, that's where they get their food. Mm-hmm. So my mind thinks in that split second there's got to be a reef nearby. I've got to catch this guy, and he will tow me to a reef. So my brain changed from, okay, bite my head off. Oh, no, I've got to catch you. And I actually thought for a brief second that I could catch a damn shark in the middle of the ocean. And with a flick of his tail, he swam away. He was obviously just inquisitive, and he swam away. And I nearly started crying. Mark, I was like, please come back. Please come back. And he was gone.
So let's pause the story with you in the water right now. And let's fast forward, and I'm fast forwarding like 8 hours now, right? Okay. And now all your boys that are on the boat are now at some point in time waking up, and now this is after the fact that you've been rescued and you're finding out all this information. But from what they told you, what was going on with those guys on the boat when they obviously at some point in time they're like, hey, where's Brett? Where's Brett? And there's no Brett, and now they start to go into that whole panic.
Yeah, so no one realized until they got right to the other side, till they got to the Mentawai Islands, to a small town, to a Paget, a harbor where you have to register that your boat's arrived, and then you start cruising all the little islands. So they cruised in. The captain went in to register that or was about to go, and my cabin mate said, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Brett?" And they said, "No, I mean we saw him being sick last night upstairs, but the one guy that I was helping said I think he went downstairs back to bed." So my cabin mate said, "Well, he didn't come back to my cabin." So they started looking through all the cabins, pulling the duvets back, and there was no me there. And then they suddenly, it is so interesting because they said they were even opening drawers in the kitchen and in the cupboards, and then the shock hit them. They suddenly went, "He's not on board." And then they quickly did a search to see if they could see any blood, thinking maybe I'd slipped and fallen, cracked my head and fallen overboard. They couldn't find any blood, and then the skipper had to go and report that there was a man overboard. So he went and did that. And then they just started phoning people, and they all got together. I mean, from what I heard and what they shared in the book later was that they were very cohesive. You know, we in South Africa all had to do military service for our country for 2 years, so we'd all had lots of experience in military search and rescue, stuff like that. So they chose one guy to be the leader, one guy to look after the boat. And they just really caucus. And interestingly, one of my mates is a helicopter pilot. He immediately got the map out. He got the GPS out, took the route that they'd come down on, and tried to calculate where the current had been, and said, "Okay, we're going back on the same route, taking into account the current." And 12 hours to the hour. And the only reason we know this is because I'd seen just before I fell off, so we kind of know it was between 2:15 and 2:45 a.m. and 2:30 that afternoon, I saw this boat coming, and they sailed up, and they stopped, Mark. They stopped 200 yards away from me. I could see them. I thought they'd stop because they were being the skipper was so clever, a 65-foot boat. They're going to send the tender boat out to get me. And I'm watching them, and the current, there was a very strong current. The current was going at like 2 miles an hour. I traveled 38 or 40 miles. I work in kilometers. Wow. 72 kilometers from where I'd fallen off to where I was found eventually. But they had got it so right. But the reason they stopped is because they saw this huge big piece of polystyrene in the water. It was submerged. It had taken on so much water. It was waterlogged. And every now and then it would break the surface, and they thought it was my dead body and like an arm or a shoulder popping out the water. So they stopped to let that thing drift up to them. Now I see them stop, and I think they've stopped to collect me. But the current takes me past the boat, and I'm now at the back of the boat, and I'm trying to swim to the boat, and I'm screaming. But the storm was pretty powerful. It was raining really hard. I didn't know the rain was going straight into their faces because it was coming from behind me, so I could see pretty clearly. But they couldn't see me. And next minute, I'm put my head down, and I swim with everything I've got, lift my head up, and I just see these 2 puffs of black smoke come out the exhaust pipes of the boat, and they sailed away again. That was the worst part. I mean, finding myself in the water was bad. I knew they'd come back. They came back. I think I'm rescued. I've done this, and they go away again. I mean, that did my head in. I think I had a complete mental breakdown at that moment.
So let's go back to stay on the boat with those guys. What were they thinking? Yeah. So obviously what they saw in the water 200 yards away, they thought might have been you. It wasn't. But were they going to circle back around and re-navigate from their perspective? I know your heart was sinking because you didn't know what was going on with them.
Yeah. So they said to the skipper, "Let's just do a loop around here." They all had a gut feeling. And the skipper didn't want to do that. He said, we're going to run out of fuel. We need to go back to where we started, fill up again, and then come back on the same route. And that's what they did. Once they started up there, they sailed all the way back to where we started in Padang. They refueled and then set sail again the next morning.
Oh, so you had to go through a whole another cycle of this.
Yeah, I had to go through the whole rest of that afternoon, the whole night. And I was found by an Australian boat the next day at 7:15 a.m.
So the book that you were talking about, you referenced just a minute ago, is called Alone, Lost, Overboard in the Indian Ocean with Brett Archibald. Yeah. I mean, just incredible tale. So now those guys take off, and the plan, I mean, I don't know what kind of plan that would be necessarily, because to expect that you could actually survive a whole nother night out there swimming on your own is insane.
To be fair, they didn't. I mean, they said, look, if we don't pick him up before night comes again, then we're looking for a body the next day.
Yeah.
And that's why there was such this. Some of the guys just wanted to see before phoning my family and telling them that I was missing. Some of the guys said, let's just go and find him, and if we find him, then we don't have to tell anybody. And the other guys were, and if we don't find him, and then we only tell them 12, 15, 18 hours later, and his wife says, why didn't you tell me when it happened? Like, how are we going to deal with that? So that makes sense. Yep. So that was the plan. They phoned.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So now these guys go back to port, right? And so based on the logic that you just explained, now they make that phone call to your wife, correct?
No, they'd made that phone call in the morning before they started searching. Yeah.
Okay.
They called straight away and said, look, he's gone.
Yeah, well,
we're going to find him.
Yeah, he's missing, right? But she's, everybody's assuming the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except her. She knew. She knew the whole time.
Really?
We have an incredible telepathy, yeah. And I tell you, it's just amazing. I heard her shouting at me in my head. It was obviously what I was making up, but I heard her shouting, swim, you bugger, swim. You're not leaving me a widow with 2 little kids. Our kids were 9 and 6 at the time.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because her sister is a psychologist. And when I got back, my first concern was I spoke to her sister and said, like, how was Anita? Did she have a meltdown? How do we deal with this going forward? And she said, she was incredible. She just said, I know he's alive. I will know when he's dead, and I know he's fighting. So we just have to get everybody mobilized and just get as many boats in the water, planes, everything we can do. And that was their focus from South Africa. She set up a FBI headquarters. It was insane. And it just, they were pinging every surf camp, every surf boat in that area and just saying, please help, please help. But the storm was so bad that no boats could go out, no planes could launch. It was just those 3 boats that were in the water already.
That's incredible. Another good stroke of fortune, considering the circumstance you found yourself in, was that you had these mates of yours that were all military trained, and so they really knew how to quickly organize and deploy a search and rescue. And then you have your wife, very calm and collected, also you said, running almost like an FBI search and really focusing everything on the positivity of we're going to get this guy, my husband. He's going to make it. We just need to deploy the right resources to make sure that all happens. Yeah.
And that was the focus. But unfortunately, because of the weather conditions, all the stuff they were trying to do didn't happen. So by the time the second nightfall set in, my wife, the whole place there just went, this is a problem. It's nighttime again. He can't make it through a second night. The guys on the boat, some of them had said, look, tomorrow when we go out, we're looking for a body. No, he's not going to be swimming. But interestingly, the Australian skipper, he was registering his boat to sail back. So when you sail into the Mentawai Islands, you register, I'm logging in here, I'm here for 2 weeks. They were leaving the next day to go back to the mainland with his crew of 9. Also, it's such a weird story. We were 9 South Africans celebrating a 50th birthday. They were 9 Aussie blokes celebrating a 50th. The 2 guys whose 50th it was never met each other in their lives. Both their birthdays were on the same day, which happened to be the day I was found. So they had the biggest party you've ever seen in your life.
Well, yeah.
It was
insane. That combination. That would be crazy. But
Aussies, South Africans just going mad.
No, it's awesome. So when the Aussie boat was sailing back, right? They were just sailing back to go back to the mainland. They weren't also looking. They weren't aware of this whole story that you might be in the water. No, they were about to. So their crew guy goes into the captain, the port authority, to say we're leaving tomorrow. Our boat will be leaving this area and heading back to Padang. Overheard our skipper telling the port authority that they had a man overboard, and he went running back to the Aussie boat and said, "Guys, there's a South African overboard." And it's just such an insane story because the skipper of the Aussie boat, his best friend passed away that morning.
living in Australia, and I've become really good mates with some of the guys that saved my life. And they said to me it was like he knew he couldn't save his mate, so he put all his energy into saving me. He's lived there for 40 years. He knows those waters. And he just said to the guys, he said, I'm going to look for this guy who's coming with me. And 3 of them went with him, and he went out in a little tin boat with 2 motors on the back into that storm, and they searched until they were called back by the Port Authority at 8 p.m. that night in the storm. He said, guys, you're jeopardizing your boat and your crew. You've got to come in. And he came in, and they said he was like a man possessed. He was walking up and down on the boat saying, I should have found him. I should have found him. And as he was looking out into the ocean, he saw a bunch of coconuts floating along, and they were going the wrong way. The current had changed. So where he'd been looking, and that's also when my guys came back, the current, not always in that area, kind of runs north to south. But because of the severity of the storm, the current had drifted and was now kind of going south-southwest. So I'd moved on the current, and this guy knew I would be on the current. So he started, every 10 minutes, he threw a coconut into the water. And then the next morning at 4 a.m., it was a perfect, clear, beautiful day, he set sail and put a guy on the front of his boat just to look for coconuts and point left and right, and he just followed the coconuts, and he literally sailed straight up to me.
Wow. So when he sailed up to you, did he sail up to you on one of these larger boats, or this was the smaller tin one?
No. He was in a big boat. He was in his 50-foot yacht.
Yeah.
Called the Baron Joey. Yeah, they were following the coconuts in the big yacht. And it's so interesting because I saw them coming from a long way away because I could see the top of the mast. In fact, when I first saw it, I could only see the top of the mast. It was a black cross. And I actually was screaming, oh man, I was saying, God, take that and shove it, buddy. I've had too many signs from you. And I thought it was a complete hallucination. And then it got closer and closer, and then suddenly I saw the bow of the boat and the whole hull, and this guy sitting on the front pointing left and right. I'm thinking, why are you doing that? And then they turned away from me. They actually turned, and I thought, no, this can't happen again. This cannot happen again. And they turned, but it's when I was talking to him afterwards, I said, you turned away from me. Why? And he said, I just put my head down. His sister died from cancer previous year, and his best friend had died that morning. And he just said, I spoke to both of them. I said, help me find this guy. And he said, his mate's voice came into his head and said, turn 1 degree to starboard. And he did. And he showed me on the map afterwards that if he'd stayed on the same chart, I told you the current was going so fast. By the time, if he'd stayed on that charted course, by the time he got to where I was, I would have been so far in the current they would have missed me. But by turning 1 degree to starboard, the current was going that way, and boom, we connected.
Wow.
And they sailed. I saw them, and I screamed. I screamed like you've never. I remember saying to them, did you hear me screaming? And I thought I was saying, hey, guys, over here, over here. They said, yeah, mate, we thought there was a wounded buffalo in the ocean.
That's awesome.
That's how much noise I was making. Yeah, it's just I still have got good goosebumps just telling you the story again.
So when you go back to the first time that the boat, your mates turned around and went the other direction, they came within 200 yards of you, and then you started swimming, and then they, the captain said, hey, we need to go back and refuel. What was going through your mind at that point? I mean, you're elated, you've got hope, and then that hope goes out the window.
That was the lowest point of the whole thing. I knew my boys would come back for me. I mean, as I said, we'd all done military training. That straight away, after the initial hysteria of finding myself in the water, I remember just going into this complete logic thought process. I'd asked the skipper how long it's going to take. He said, we still got another 10 hours. I said, okay, 10 hours. They would refuel immediately or turn the boat around and come straight back. So 10 hours plus how long they'd go full speed, say 4 hours, and so 14 hours. How do I stay alive? Because my boys are coming back. And it was 12 hours, and here they come. And I am so pumped up, and I'm laughing to myself, and they sail away again. And I had the biggest meltdown a human being could ever have. I swore, I cursed, I cried, I just could not believe it. And then the most amazing thing happened. There was this massive downpour of rain. I saw the Virgin Mary in a cloud. I knew it wasn't real. I mean, I know I was hallucinating, but it was so real because it was this metal. I knew it wasn't real, but that went away quickly, and then I saw a buoy, a big floating marking buoy. And I knew it was far away, but I knew I could swim there. So I start singing my songs, I'm talking to myself, I'm swimming along, and I'm heading towards this buoy. It had a bell on it. I still hear that bell clanking, clang, 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 and had a yellow light going round and round. And in my mind, I was going to get on this buoy. I was going to MacGyver. Do you know you have MacGyver in America?
Sure.
Yeah, MacGyver was my man growing up. I was going to MacGyver this, because every buoy's got if you don't know anything about being in the ocean, every buoy's got a transmitter on it. I'm going to take that transmitter apart. I'm going to do Morse code. I'm going to signal a helicopter, and I'm going to be collected on this buoy. And I swam and I swam and I swam. This buoy was always there. And I know it's impossible to tell relative time, but been a long time. And then I started cramping, but I could still see the buoy, and I thought I have to swim. And I put my head down and I swam as hard as I could, lifted my head up, and there was nothing there. And I was shown afterwards and described by the doctors how I'd swallowed so much, I started hallucinating so radically. I saw a pirate ship. I saw two kids paddle up to me in a mackerel canoe. It's called a perahau, a little wooden log boat there. I heard these guys talking, saying, Mister, we come save your life. And I remember chatting to them, saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. But when I went to grab that boat, there was nothing there. But all those things were those crazy things that I told you that kept me going. Because I think I had nothing left, and then seeing this little boat and going to grab it, I think I was nodding off. The action of grabbing that boat, I coughed, spluttered, woke up, and there was nothing there. Same with the pirate boat. They threw a rope ladder down. I still heard it go bang, bang, bang down the side of the boat. And I swam up to it, and I went to grab it to climb up, and there was nothing there. And these pirates, I heard them saying, swim, young man. I remember saying, thanks for the young. I'm 50 years old, buddy. I love you thinking I'm young. And I had all these conversations. It was just bizarre.
Yeah, well, things and crazy things happen when you're talking about these tales of survival, of mind games, things that are real, things that are not real, just whatever you need to do to keep yourself alive, and that's what you did. That's what your body, just reacted to.
Yeah.
So now when the Aussies, pull up, how is that seen? They bunch of the guys jump in and over, jump in the water and swim over to you and help you in, or do they just pull up alongside? How did that help?
No. So they're coming towards me in this boat, and I screamed, and they were going slightly. They would have gone past the left-hand side of me, and then I screamed, and I saw the guy on the front of the boat who was pointing at the coconuts. He looked up, but he kept looking to the right, and I was screaming, and then suddenly he looked at me, and I just heard this roar come off their boat. And they said I came out the water like a water polo goalie because I realized they'd seen me. And I just remember waving and just saying, thank you, God, thank you, thank you, thank you. They turned and they were coming at me. But as I went back into the water, I just cramped. And they threw a life buoy, and it was coming straight at me, Mark. I thought it was going to hit me on the head, and it landed probably 5 yards in front of me, and I could not swim to it. And I was just sinking down, and I thought, this is the most ironic thing ever. And I actually said goodbye to my wife and my kids because I knew I wasn't going to make it, and they weren't going to get to me in time because I could not swim to that buoy. My hands were cramped. And as my head went under the water, I just saw this guy dive over the edge of their boat. And I thought, he's coming to get me. And I was going down, 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 but I couldn't swim. And next minute, his profession is a lifeguard. He's a lifeguard in the west coast of Australia, in Perth.
Wow.
And he'd realized that I'd gone into a cramp with all that exertion of coming out the water. And he didn't even wait for the boat. He just ran and dived over, hit the water. And he dived from high, 12 foot up this ladder. He dived over the edge, hit the water, and just swam. I was going down, and I was actually in such a peaceful place. I said, because I was saying to my wife, do you know what? I gave it everything I've got. I'm proud of that. But I'm just so ironic that I'm not going to make it. And next minute, this arm came under my arms, and next minute I was just getting towed to the surface. And as my head broke the surface, he just said, we've got you, mate, we've got you. And about another 5 guys, as my head broke the surface, just jumped overboard. And they swam to me and they grabbed that buoy, and they actually tied, there's a picture on my website there where one guy held my hand onto the buoy, and they tied that rope, and they swam me back to the boat. And they'd actually made a sling to pull me up. They thought and I tell you, I saw that ladder. I clambered up that 9-foot ladder like a monkey chasing a banana, man. I got to the top. I said, Aussie, I love you guys. Where do you live? I'm moving to Australia tomorrow. and then I just collapsed. Butch.
Wow. I just reliving that last moment of the rescue just put the hairs in the back of my neck straight up. I mean, I can only imagine. And the irony, like you said, of, you survived 28 hours in the Indian Ocean. You've overcome a shark, these birds coming after you, a stingray, and just the weather, the storm, hope, and then hope going away. And then now you have a boat that's, within literally yards of you, and how your body is just like, it just
gives up.
You just like, I'm done, right?
Yeah. I will never forget that moment till the day I die, because there was a boy right in front of me, and I couldn't swim to it, and I'm just thinking, no way, man, this cannot be happening. And thank God for this guy.
So
thank God for him.
No, of course. I mean, this is the difference between you and I doing this pod, and me talking to the Aussie captain about what could have been, because you drowned, right?
Yeah.
And you survived, and that's what this story is all about. The story of survival and overcoming that adversity and just craziness. So, how has this changed, or maybe it hasn't? Maybe it was just one of those isolated incidents where it was a moment in time. It was awful. It was horrific. You overcame it, and now you're going about your life. Has there been anything that has changed the way you see the world, the way you perceive life now?
Oh, Mark, 180. My life changed 180 degrees. I mean, before I got on that boat, I'd been very fortunate. I'd worked for a big American corporate for 25 years of my life. I'd lived in America. I'd lived all over the world. I was the CEO of a big division. I was a power-hungry, money-chasing guy. I mean, that's what life was about. And then I moved back to South Africa for my kids, bought my own business, and ended up working harder in that than I ever did in the corporate, and thinking I was doing the right thing for my family. And it was only when I was in the ocean I realized that that is not the most important thing for me. My faith had gone out the window. I've been a very spiritual guy, and I've been comfortable with that, in the sense that when I'm in the ocean, that's my church, it's my happy place. I feel close to God there. But I hadn't had a good relationship. It was only when I needed God, and I talked a lot to God. I also blasphemed and said some really bad things when things weren't going right in the water. The other thing was, I realized how much my family meant to me, and that nothing else was important. And also the people that had been in my life, my friends across all the years, the people that had stuck by me in good times and bad times. And when I came back, my life changed 180 degrees. I mean, I never, ever worry about money, ever. And the weirdest thing, I never have to, because there's always enough to get by. I have no desire to be a Donald Trump or anything like that. I used to. I really chased power and fast cars and money and big houses and all the wrong stuff, and I don't ever think about that anymore. I do. I'm human, and I fail often, but I'm able to recognize it immediately and know that I'm going down the wrong path again. I step away from it, go back, and I have what I call my 3 Fs: my faith, family, and my friends. And when all those things are in sync, my life is absolutely perfect.
That's great.
And that's how I live my life now. I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes regularly, but I know that when I get those 3 things right, everything in my life is just amazing, and that's what I strive for every day.
So tell me what you are doing today.
So today I'm involved in a hospitality and event business, which is just fantastic. We do a big beer fest like the October Munich Fest in South Africa. And I have partners with a interestingly Australian guy. I can't get away from the Aussies. My partner's an Australian. The Aussies rescued my life. We also have a wine show event. We have six wine shows across South Africa where we showcase South African wines in all the major cities. And we have an event product called Tough Mudder. I think you'll know of it in America.
I've done one.
You've done it? Oh, yep. Good man. You've got to come and do it in South Africa.
Love, just waiting for the invite.
So I'm going to send you one of those. So we have the franchise or license agreement for Africa. So we're running those events in South Africa. And then I'm on the, just by pure fluke it happened, I'm on the World Inspirational Speaker Circuit. So I do a lot of that. I travel around the world speaking to people about this event and how it's changed my life, and tying it through business, and how sometimes the moral of my story is treading water in turbulent times. So whether you want to relate it to your personal life, or to your business life, or to your business itself, as a company struggling, I mean, the world's in a bad place. There are a lot of people struggling out there.
Yep.
And I'm really able to, if knowing the topic of certainly corporates, I've had a phenomenal run with being able to help businesses turn their company around from a productivity perspective, from a belief perspective in their staff and their customers. So I do that. That is probably the biggest part of my life at the moment. I'm very fortunate that my partner in our hospitality and event business is a very understanding guy. So I work with that business as much as I can, but I travel a lot. I spend a lot of time sharing this amazing story with the rest of the world.
Well, like you said, it ripples in every direction in terms of what life is all about. I do also speak a little bit out there, again, on the whole topic of overcoming adversity and finding your way. And then really the strategies behind that. It's just everybody, doesn't matter who you are, everybody goes through something. And, in your case, it was extreme. In my case, there's been other things that have been bumps in the road between, divorce and death in the family and just, jobs and this and that. And it's just what do you do when those things happen, and how are you going to face it? And it's easy to say, hard to do, but it's just so satisfying if you can actually overcome something like what you did, pull it off, and then just have that new perspective. And the best thing I've heard about everything that's come out of your mouth is that, through the trials and tribulations of that experience in particular, you sound very purposeful about those 3 F's that you talked about. And that it's just such an important component of what life is really all about, faith, family, and friends. Yeah.
I fundamentally believe that. And it's so amazing because I think that I've always been searching for that. And I've driven myself. I come from pretty tough growing up period, and having just about having everything in life and losing it all when I was a young kid. And I don't blame anybody for that. It's just something that happened, and I thought I'd really faced adversity well, and I'd done so well, and I'd become the CEO of this company. But having gone through something like this, I've been able to look back and see that I was chasing something, and it wasn't money, it wasn't the bank account, it wasn't the big house, it wasn't the fast car, it was the balance in my life. And as I say, my biggest challenge is getting that balance and the 3 in all to be in sync, because I think that's really hard. And I know I've shared with, I've shared with over 50,000 people in 9 countries across the globe. I mean, the feedback I get, for me, my big adversity was being in the ocean, but for someone, it could just be getting through a divorce or dealing with the death of a loved one. It's all relative, and sometimes we as human beings discount that because we don't. What might be a radical thing for me might just be nothing for you, and vice versa. So I might share with you, I'm going through this, and you think, well, that's not so bad, but for me, it might be almost life and death. And I've learned that's been, I think, the biggest lesson that if somebody said, I'm having a bad time, I went, well, you don't know what a bad time is. I've been through a bad time, rough childhood, fought my way through everything, and look at me now. So get your act together. Let me tell you, when I was in that ocean for those 28.5 hours, I got a real realignment that's not everything for somebody can be read completely different, and that could be their worst moment. And I thought I'd had bad moments in my life. That, being in the ocean, I realized was my really bad moment. And that gave me the biggest wake-up call of my life.
Yeah, couple things there. Number one, it is all relevant to everybody's situation. And number 2, sometimes the earth has to move for you to rebalance, which was the second thing you just talked about. Because I think it's easy to talk about trying to get in balance and sync, but you're constantly being thrown out of that balance based on things that hit you. You wake up and, somebody may need you and your time gets eaten up and you have to go over and work, extra hours or something, and that takes you away from your kids or your wife or, those things that you talked about, which are so important. And I have found for me is that taking those time outs, in particular for me, as you know, my mountain climbing background, being in that moment of solitude where you don't have phones and faxes and emails and everything else hitting your phone because you're not in cell coverage, gives you a lot of time to really recenter yourself. One of the reasons why I moved to Sun Valley, Idaho, I am stuck right in the middle of the mountains in the middle of Idaho, and it's beautiful, but it also gives me time to really think and try to maintain that balance. And again, I'll go back to those three things that you have found to be of so much value, and I value the same things. And frankly, everybody should. I mean, faith, family, and friends should be at the top of the list with anybody. But so often, there'll be business or other commitments that get pushed in there that shove out one of those three F's. So, love what you're saying. Listen, where can people find you?
They can find me on. You can just Google Brett Archibald, or I have a website called www.brettarchibald.com. And there are videos, there's contact details, there's direct online. So submit an email, it comes straight through to me.
That's
I will
awesome.
respond within 24 hours.
I love that. You and I are cut from the same cloth. I do the same thing. You are the author of Alone, Lost Overboard in the Indian Ocean. You're a survivor. You're a public speaker. You're a business owner. You've got a lot of great things going on. So listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking about this amazing adversity that you faced, that you overcame, and that you have really focused on what is important in life, and you're doing it. And you're doing it in the right way.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And you and I are going to get together, because that solitude that you went to the mountains for, I came back to Cape Town and I never knew why. And now, obviously I can't get in the water every day, but I try at least 5 out of 7 days a week. And even if it's for 20 minutes, just to go and reset and think about the things where there's no phone, no fax, no telephone, no computer, just realign, and every day is a blessing.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. All right, well, listen, thank you so much, Brett. Have a great day, and I hope to catch up with you down in South Africa.
I hope you're going to come and do Tough Mudder with me, buddy.
I will do it. All right.
Okay. Good one. Thank you so much, Mark. Take care.
Thank you. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there, because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.